So, hi everybody. It's a little bit past 1 at the moment, and I am today here with my colleague from the Netherlands, Elrich, and he is going to talk to you today about starting a Scrum team. My name is Sophia, and I'm going to be the host today, and I'm going to support Elrich in the background a little bit. So you can use the chat today to chat with us about anything, write comments freely on the topics. And then for all of your questions, please put them in the Q&A so we can have a look at them in the end of the webinar. When you're chatting with us, please also make sure that you're writing to all panelists and attendees. It's the blue box in the chat that you can change so that everyone else also attending can see your comments and your writings. The session is recorded, and we are going to share the recording with every one of you also after the presentation, so stay tuned for that. Without any further presentation, I'm going to hand over to Elrich. He can present himself and then move on with the webinar topic. Have fun.
Hey everyone, I see we have a nice group of people. So I'm really looking forward to today. It's a bit interesting speaking to people who can't respond real time. So I'm going to try and address the different levels and the different experiences in the room. I see we have some Scrum Masters, we have some Agile coaches, some project managers, some product managers, and I think with each of these, the questions might be a bit different. So I'm going to try to keep it at a high level and maybe every now and then dive a bit deeper into a coaching view, a team dynamics view. And let's see where it goes. Please pop in some questions and then I'll see if I can address it. So just to kick off as an introduction, like the Scrum Guide says, Scrum is easy to understand, but quite incredibly difficult to master. And the guidelines that I'm going to give you guys today is also some things that can guide you in a process of experimentation with your team and your organization. This is by no means a blueprint that you can blindly follow. So hopefully there's some takeaways for everyone. Let's start diving in. I'm sharing my screen. Just one moment. Okay, so one of the typical challenges that I see when looking at Scrum teams in organizations is there tends to be a bit of a lack of a shared vision and a common goal. Now, the value of the goal and the vision is that it gives us as an organization, but also as us as a team, something to align around or something to align behind. Now, if we don't have a common goal and a common vision as an organization, division happens. So if I say division, I mean, this you can practically see when you get things like sub-Scrum teams within Scrum teams. There's a level of chaos and confusion because there's no cohesion in where we are going as an organization and inherently as a team. So we need to have, on an organizational level, a shared understanding of where we are going to and what we want to accomplish. So this is the very first thing to get clear. The construct of a team is not just a organizational thing where we say, okay, this is what's supposed to happen in the engineering department. This is what it's supposed to look like. We need to see and decide where the value lies and then align around the value and the vision, and not try to align the value and the vision around the team constructs. So moving on from that, the next question before we start actually building a Scrum team is Scrum really the right thing for us to do? Now, in an environment where causality is a reality, which means we have really simple way of doing things, and we've done it 100 times before. So for instance, if I flick a light, I know the light's going to go on, and that's hopefully going to continue forever, for 100% of the time, dependent on your country, but that's something else entirely. And also when we look at a environment where complexity, or not complexity, where things are complicated. So if I say complicated, I mean that we don't know, but we can find out. There are people who really know the process. They can help us figure out what should happen, and by doing that once or doing that twice, we can get sustainable processes in place. So if we think about environments that are either simple or then complicated and later become a bit more simple, it would be something like manufacturing. Now, when you're in a complicated domain, experimentation is not always the necessity that you need. You focus on high efficiency, you build your production line, you make sure you optimize it, yes, by continual inspection and adaptation, but once it is in place, it is working. Now, if we look at Scrum, we look at a world where causality does not necessarily exist. Now, what I mean when I say that is that we need to take a journey through a world where uncertainty is the norm. And the way that we can do that is by quickly, in cycles, we call it sprints, learn as quickly as we possibly can and make sure we deliver maximum value at the right time. So we aim to always deliver, let's say, the next 20% most valuable things in the next 2 weeks. But what we thought might be most valuable in 6 months will most likely not be the case, because there is no causality. We do not know what is going to happen. And it's an environment like this where Scrum essentially thrives. If there's a confusion between these two worlds, so we do not know where we are, we start running into challenges where we can easily say Scrum does not work for us. So it's important to consciously decide why we as a team actually want to use this framework, and that what the value would be that it brings to us. Now, moving forward, when we start looking at a team, what's really important is to consider our team dynamics. Now, when we take the first steps, so we have now established a common goal, we know that this is not necessarily an environment where causality lives, it is a complex environment. We can now start kicking off a team. Now, when we kick off the team, we have this common goal, which helps us initially get going. So we all know, okay, we're sort of in the direction of this, and we start doing some things. And that's okay. We get some sort of stability. We start delivering some things. But then what we typically see is that we drop into a moment where we start discovering things. And what we start discovering is that we are different. As people, we are different. The environment is actually different than what we expected. There are a lot of impediments or challenges in the environment where we are functioning. And we need to try and address these things. And that's where a Scrum Master, for instance, or an Agile coach can be extremely helpful, because he can help the team actually identify the challenges or impediments that they are experiencing, either on a relational level, team dynamic level, or on a very pragmatic level in the organization. Help them identify these and help them resolve them, or help the team empower the team to learn how to resolve it themselves. Now, once we manage to step out of this valley of despair where things aren't really going that well, we step into a norming stage where we can now get some sort of momentum going with the work. So now we sort of standardized on our processes, we standardized on the way that we see each other, the roles that we have in the organization, the roles that we have in the team. And hopefully, over time, we start flowing in such a way that we become highly collaborative, we become a team where there is synergy. And with synergy, I mean that we can finally start leveraging things like our group intelligence. There is true collaboration. We know how to make good shared decision making. And that's the that's the thing that we would like to achieve with a healthy team. So keep in mind that when you start a Scrum team, we are aiming towards high performance. We are aiming towards synergy. There's a very distinct difference between a working group and what we want to see as a collaborative team. And the one is that the working group might have some sort of a common interest, but they are not aligned in their purpose and their vision. So we want to make sure that this group actually has a shared need to accomplish the same things. Otherwise, the coordination will most likely never move towards collaboration, because it doesn't need to happen. We can simply continue what we are doing. Now, if we consider the remote working situation that we find ourselves in at this stage, there's another perspective. And this perspective is that a change, so let's look at what's happening there. We can see this as a change that is injected into a system. And what that change causes is that we probably start moving into some parts of this curve again. Now, does it mean that we completely regress? No. But as a Scrum Master and as an Agile coach, as a product owner, as a team member, be aware that the uncertainty has an effect on the team dynamics, has an effect on the way that we work together. And we might need to reestablish some things, new processes, new way of leadership, new ways of thinking. And that is what we need to mitigate as coaches while we're in the journey of this team forming. So then, the next step. which is really important when you get your first team going, and that is psychological safety. Now, this is a very wide subject that we can most likely talk about for days, but simply speaking, make sure that your team is comfortable in the situation that they find themselves. Make sure that you identify the needs that the team has, and those needs, I mean, on both a organizational context level, on a personal level, as well as a team level. So what do we need in order to be able to function effectively as a team and to be able to have each other's backs? We have the Scrum values, and those, for instance, are things like focus. They are things like courage. They are things like respect. And those cannot exist if there is not a healthy relationship. Now, when we consider needs, of course, the team is able to address each other's needs in a healthy way. And something like, for instance, a market of skills exercise can be a very useful starting point to, on a pragmatic level, open up the door where the teams can discover what they can bring to each other. And this is not just me bringing what I can do, but me being safe enough, having the space to bring who I am. That's the differentiation, safety. When starting a new team, there are a few things that I think are really important factors towards achieving success. The one is insight and knowledge. If we talk about insight, insight is something that's experiential, which means that by experience, we gain insight. We need to be patient with each other. We need to ask for help in order to not need to learn the lessons that we have learned before or other people have learned before. Knowledge is really important. If we don't know the Scrum framework, then how will we be able to implement the Scrum framework? So, insight and knowledge. The second element that I believe is crucial toward accomplishing a successful team is practice and patience. So again, we are not going to get this right the first time, and we are going to have to make some mistakes on our own. And I think when an organization decides to move towards the implementation of Scrum, they should acknowledge the need of the teams to be able to practice. If a team finds itself in the storming phase, so I'm going back to this picture. If a team finds itself in the storming phase, then practicing is a good journey for them to learn where to go next. And if the organization sees that as immediate failure, then we are not going to have the opportunity to inspect and adapt. And that is exactly what the framework empowers us to do, to grow over time. And we might grow slowly, because slow growth often means that growth is sustainable. And we would like to see sustainable growth. Now, the next element is patience. I think I've mentioned it a few times by now, but be patient with yourself. create the space where you can make mistakes. I like using the phrase failing forward. So fail, have a fail-safe environment, have the patience with your team. If you're a Scrum Master, as a coach, teach people what it means to be patient when it comes to this process. It's not about just letting things be and giving it space. It's about letting things be, identifying what the challenges are, addressing that in such a way that we can, with momentum, grow step by step. The next factor to success is a value focus. So if we do not align what we are trying to do around the value that we want to produce as an organization, then what are we working towards? If this is not the focus, then most likely our team will lean towards creating output. So maybe doing a lot of things, maybe doing the things right, but they will not create the value that's expected. And the question there would be, if you do not have a value focus, if you're not delivering value and simply output, then is Scrum really working for you? Is it contributing the value that you would like it to, that you would like to see? Okay, at this moment, I just want to, if I can, look at the Q&A, see if there's anything in there that we can address now. I think we'll pick that one up a bit later. So if anyone else has another question at this moment about what I've said up to now, please quickly pop it up and let's see. Okay, so there's nothing immediately. We'll get back to that then. Now, once we have all of these things a bit more clear and aligned, so now we know why we decided to use Scrum, by evaluating the vision, by looking at the environment and seeing whether we are in a complicated world, whether there's a lot of complexity, understanding what we need to start establishing a healthy team dynamic, we can move forward to a very pragmatic approach. So for this approach, I am going to take you through the practical steps of starting a Scrum team. Now, the very first step, I would say, is to look at some training, right? Now, we might say, oh, training is not that important. I read the Scrum Guide and now that is enough for me. I'm just going to start doing this. Now, I can tell you that if we don't have the insight into what the value is that the product owner, Scrum Master, and the development team is supposed to bring to the table, then the theory is not going to empower us to deliver the value. So we said insight and knowledge and practice and patience. So we will gain insight by the assistance of people who are a bit more experienced than what we have. The knowledge we will get through the training, the material, and what we read. And the training will help us to actually contextualize all of this and get to a place where we can leverage the knowledge to understand the value of the framework. I'm going to look at the different roles that we have. We have the product owner, Scrum Master, development team, a crucial part of what a coach should do within the context of a organization is to focus on these roles and make sure that they understand the value that they should bring. Now, for instance, the product owner needs to be trained in order to understand that he is the custodian of the product, yes, but his primary consideration in the organization is to provide value. So the product owner needs to understand how important value is. That is how he is going to guide his team, and that is how he is going to help them to build a vision. Now, if I say vision at this stage, I mean a team vision, which will most likely be a derivative of our company or our organizational vision. The second one is the Scrum Master. So if we train the Scrum Master, then our aim is to actually do Scrum right? The responsibility of the Scrum Master is to make sure that Scrum is understood and enacted well in the organization, and emphasis on the organization as well. So what we want to do as a Scrum Master is help empower him to discover what the power is that the framework can bring to his team. So yes, establish a healthy team, but help guide that team to become autonomous, to become self-organized, and to become an influencer in the bigger context of the organization. The team is not stuck in their dark corner. The team becomes an asset on different levels for the organization. And that's what we want to see. The third part is, of course, the development team. Often I hear the words that a development team looks at the framework and they say, oh, it's just another set of meetings. It's just more things that's going to take our focus away from actually doing the work. And that most likely is because the value of the framework and what it is supposed to bring to them as a team as well is not understood. So as a coach, take those steps to ask them to help them reflect on the value of a retrospective. Is it simply something to look at the past, and we do it for 15 minutes and quickly ask, okay, what can we change? What can we make new? Or is it a really opportunity for this Scrum team to look at the established vision, what they would like to accomplish, and what the next smallest step is to be able to actually do that? So if the Scrum team has a clear motivation of where they are on their way to and what they want to reach, then the retrospective does not become just another meeting. It becomes a moment where the team can step from challenges in the storming phase by addressing and acknowledging them, and taking those challenges and moving them within the context of performing. Remember, I mentioned briefly that the team experience there is not necessarily a linear one. So we are not going to go through all those phases every time. We can identify something that we storm around, and once we resolve that, that actually becomes a sustainable change, which helps us leverage the synergy and become high performing. So we are always going to have some challenges that are trying to pull us down from this high performing team. And as we address those in a sustainable way in the retrospective, we are empowered. So the team, once they understand the value, they can really say this is our team. It is not something that has been forced by the organization. It is not something that we simply now need to do because it's the next thing in the market to do. It is something that we actually buy into, because that is going to help us experience more happiness, experience more freedom, have the space to be innovative, to be creative, and that's what we want to see in our team. So first step, training. The second step is that it is a good idea to have a team kickoff. So if we have a team kickoff, then now we have a well-trained team and they can start practicing a bit and putting that knowledge that they gain to the test. In a kickoff process, there are a few things that I would say is quite important. The first one is the vision. So what I mentioned previously is that we have the organizational vision, and then this team actually has a vision of their own, which of course very closely aligns with the organizational vision. So let's say, for instance, the aim of the organization is to build the most awesome online payment experience that ever existed. Then the focus of that specific team would, for instance, be to build fantastic front-end services in order to empower that. So a subset. Then the second one is agreement. So we want to have a common understanding about the way that we work together. So for instance, if we say we make a conscious choice to be respectful towards each other, which is really a common one, of course, then that is something that we can put up as external reference, which means if I, as a team member, do not feel respected, I can externalize this by pointing to this agreement we made and saying, guys, I do not feel that we are aligning with the agreement we just or we made, which creates a space for a bit more of a non-threatening conversation than me stepping up to you and saying, I don't think you respect me. It creates a different context for the team to function in, and it creates a sense of safety. The next step is purpose. So team purpose. Now, purpose is something that actually motivates the team intrinsically. So we have the vision which we're working towards. The purpose is something that motivates us towards working. And a interesting purpose statement would, for instance, be, as a team, we would like to build fantastic products while learning and growing on the way. So we have a few things that are important to us, and that is what's going to motivate us as a team. Our definition of done. The definition of done is an artifact in Scrum itself. And that is something that's going to help us get common understanding of how we actually want to do our work and what we see as success and what is going to guide us in the quality that we deliver that. Now, there are a few things that we want to address. So why we do these things. And the first one is to stir motivation. You can probably guess that if I have a clear vision, if we have a clear team purpose, then I have something which I am focusing towards, and I have something that motivates me so that I am passionate about getting there. So we're looking at stirring motivation by creating the space for autonomy, making sure that there's room to really become masters, and to make sure that there's a purpose, a bigger view on this. A quality focus, something like the definition of done, it helps us to set quality standards quite quickly, so we know if we do something, we do it in this way, and this is the right way according to our definition and our agreement. The last one is that we gain common understanding as a team. So we have the common place where we now can stand and start working effectively from. So if we have our working agreement, I'm going back to the team view at the top. So if we have the forming stage where things seem to be going really well, and we have no common understanding of how we treat each other. As an example, if we drop into this storming stage, then you can imagine it's going to be a bit more challenging because we don't know where we stand with each other. That's one example. Then we prepare our backlog. So that's an important step. We need to make sure that we actually have some work that we can start doing. And this is a journey that the Agile Coach or Scrum Master takes very explicitly with the product owner. How do we make sure that we present the business language or the business needs or the business value in such a way that we create space for our Scrum team to be able to actually be creative and innovative when thinking about solutions. In our first sprints, we have knowledge. So we add some teaching, we have knowledge, but we haven't practiced yet and we haven't gained our own insight. So it's important to do Scrum right. Do Scrum by the book. If you don't do Scrum as a framework, then you're doing some things, but you're not doing Scrum. You might do some elements which is defined in the framework, but you're not going to experience the value. And that's just going to be frustrating over time. By taking the first steps and starting with Scrum by the book, you will start seeing the emergent value. And that means that we know that the retrospective should provide some value. Now we start practicing. The more we practice, the better we get, the more we see the value that the retrospective has. So create the space and time to really see the emergent value. Now, the first sprint is all about discovering the value of Scrum. Always remember, be realistic, don't aim too high, and have patience with yourself. So just going a bit deeper into the first few sprints when we start a Scrum team. Now, what is important here is that we are now taking a bit of a coaching view on what type of role a Scrum Master or a coach should play during the first few sprints. Now, the first two sprints, we focus on the mechanics, right? So we have now learned, we've got this knowledge. Now we simply need to get this in place. So as a coach, as a Scrum Master, be present, be fully present, be engaged, and role model the behavior that you would like to see. Show the guys what a good stand-up or a good Scrum meeting looks like. Help the product owner discover what it means to, for instance, create nice tasks or user stories, most commonly used, and help the team be a bit more creative in their thinking and their innovation. Create the space, facilitate, but show, make it practical. From the second sprint onwards, we start approaching our coaching a bit differently. We want to try and get our team to a point of self-organization as quickly as possible. So self-organization, I mean that we, within the context of our team, understanding our shared capability, our group intelligence, which is now starting to evolve as we start norming, hopefully. We start leveraging that to actually make good decisions and to get stuff done. And there we still, as Scrum Masters, as coaches, model, right? We model what self-organization looks like. So guys, let's together look at this problem. Hey guys, you're sitting there, but we know you can contribute. Let's sit together. How are we going to address this thing? Role model the behavior that you would like to see. The second one is advising. So guys, it might be a good idea to try A, B, and C. Now that might sound like an anti-pattern. If we go back to our previous slide, we said that there's some needed insight. There's some experiential learning that we had from the past. So use that advising. And if you, when you're moving towards your next sprint, so let's say 10 sprints, if you're still stuck in constantly giving advice, then that is an anti-pattern you don't want to see. So be careful with advising the right thing at the right time. From the third sprint, we start focusing on continuous improvement. Now, of course, continuous improvement is something that runs across the cycle. So from the very first point, we start that. But if there is no stable state in the team, you can't really start actively improving, making small sustainable changes of value if there's not a sense of stability and security in the team. And then we can, as agile coaches, really start guiding these guys step by step, start asking some questions. What do you think would be the value of doing this? If we approach this problem in this way, what do you think? What do you think the value would be? So we ask some open questions, we ask some powerful questions to see how we can start leveraging the power of this team that is now becoming a bit more cohesive to improve and start moving towards that synergy and high performance. The engineering practice is then, sorry, my iPad dropped for a moment. So the engineering practices is also something that we focus on continuously, of course. That started at the very beginning when we looked at our kickoff workshop. We said, what is the definition of done? When we set our initial definition of done, we need to make sure that it is reachable. And when we start stepping into our fourth sprint, around there, we can say, okay, how can we start improving this definition of done? How can we really amp up our engineering practices to become more effective in what we deliver and to increase the quality of what we deliver? So we want continuous improvement. We want continuous improvement on different levels, and that is on a team dynamics level, like I mentioned previously with the Tuckman curve. but also we want continuous improvement on our technical practices. So then we are in our 5th sprint. And hopefully when we reach this moment, we will have a well-sustained, powerful team. So I hope, guys, this was a really quick overview of a few core concepts. And I hope that, that this was of value for you. So let's go to a few questions and see.
Thank you, Elrich. I think many people have a lot of questions now, so I'm going to give them a few minutes to type them in the Q&A. So guys, please feel free to add your questions there. Everything that you have described also, Elrich, now is something that we at Agile 42 also support teams with. So all the training steps can be done, the coaching can be found also from us. So I just want to mention this also to everybody now who is listening. If you want to have more basic knowledge about what Elrich also has been talking about, you can probably start off with a certified Scrum Master training, for example. And then if you want to take your skills to the next levels, there's the advanced trainings. And then there's also the advanced team coaching course that can give you some more knowledge about the topics also that supports the teams that you are working with. We also have the startup package if you are interested in this, that goes through the steps that Elrich also told you about today. So you will have our details if you want to get in touch with this. Just feel free to do that after the webinar session. There's been also a few comments, Elrich, for you in the chat about Scrum by the book, definitely, but there may be also team learning speed to take into account. Do you want to comment that comment?
Maybe answer a few questions before we go to the comments.
We can also do that. We can start from the very beginning. So let me read out the question for you, and then you can have a look at the answer you want to provide. So the first question is, what are your suggestions to the team to get the team out of the storming or depression phase? Are there any techniques that you could suggest?
Oh, that's an interesting one. So I think as a Scrum Master, we are tasked to be servant leaders, and as servant leaders, part of what we do is we try to create and show the true context. So I would say any action that you can take, retrospective or any other moment that you would like to, that you can help the guys actually understand what is going on in the dynamics of the team and what are the external influences that you are now experiencing. So an example of that, for instance, would be if the team feels that the CTO is making incorrect decisions and that is causing them to not be able to work effectively. So there is a reason why those decisions are being made. So help them contextualize, understand that. And what I can say is that initially when you look at storming and you look at highly technical people, then understand that it is valuable to start relating on a cognitive level. So how they think about things. So if you want to get transparency on the way that they see things and the way that things are, it helps them get a bit of a reality check and maybe a key to the impediments that are lying a bit underneath, that are a bit deeper than just our chairs aren't that comfortable. So hopefully that's good enough.
Yeah, you got a thank you already for the answer, so that's very good. Then here's a question divided into two, so let me take the first part first. We know that transparency, inspection, and adoption are the pillars of Scrum. How much is important, in your opinion, that management be the first driver of transparency all across the company?
Well, firstly, I'm so glad that you know the three pillars of Scrum. Fantastic, you get a gold star. And secondly, I think it's absolutely crucial that transparency starts with the organization and the leadership of the organization. Some of the most intensive conflicts I've seen in organizations is where someone else, so let's say as a coach, I step into an organization and I start shining light on things that are not transparent. The system starts collapsing on itself, um, which is really not fun to see. So the more we are in the know, and the vision, the company vision is a good example of that, right? If we are not transparent about the vision and what we actually want to accomplish, then this is something that exists in our minds, but not in the minds of the teams, and it causes frustration over time. So I would say absolutely, it needs to start there.
The second part then of the question is, the bottom-up intelligence in the team should be empowered as much as possible for a successful Scrum team. What is your opinion on this?
I don't quite understand what's meant with bottom up intelligence. If I understand it correctly, I think one of the most important things and valuable things of a cohesive group intelligence. So absolutely, the value of a team is that they can provide something to the organization that no one else can. Otherwise, why are they being employed? Why are they being empowered to deliver those things? But you really need the power of the intelligence of the team to have that impact. If the team has a different opinion than the CTO, the space should be there to have these discussions and actually be able to justify why we think in the way we think. And that will have significant impact on decision making. So yeah, absolutely. I think leveraging group intelligence is essential, and it takes time, and it's awesome to see when it happens.
Thank you. I'm going to pick another question here. How do you deal with kicking off a diverse team? For example, different vendors, different time zones, or power dynamics, etc.
So I would say there are few elements there. When we look at, let's say, distributed teams and time zones, we cannot have healthy relationships if we do not spend time together. So having a Slack conversation where we do our daily meetings, it completely contradicts the value of what we are trying to do. We are trying to create the conversations that brings us to closer. So I would say a central theme through all of the elements that you mentioned is relationship. So if you can create the openness between the cultures, the openness between people when they are available in different time zones, and create the opportunity for connection, you will see how that connection starts flourishing into the practical elements of your teamwork. I don't have the question in front of me, so I can't see if I covered all the elements. I hope so.
I think you did, yes. There's a question, can you please provide an example of Sprint 1 mechanics approach role model?
Okay, so Sprint 1 is we now have established our training. And if we role model, then of course we have the sprint events. So we start off with the sprint planning, and let's say we want to present the backlog. Then I believe as an agile coach, you should have the capacity to understand the work and the responsibilities of the product owner better or on the same level as he does, which means here is a backlog, very pragmatic. Guys, we had our refinement meeting between me and the product owner. I can now show you that in business language, as the primary stakeholder or whatever, we would like to see the following value delivered. This is the business language. Now, what do you guys want to do with this? And then maybe one guy will jump in and say this is the solution. And then we can say, okay, let's think about this together. They might say, okay, it's going to take us 2 days. And then we reflect back and say, okay, but did it actually take 2 days in the past? Or is there a different way that we can look at this? And then I can maybe give some advice. So I think if we want to boil it down to a single sentence, it is be very hands-on, involved in every step of the framework, and do it yourself first. Right? Let them see how it needs to be done. And do it once or twice and then create space. Otherwise, as a Scrum Master, you will see some anti-patterns develop.
I'm going to make a quick comment here. We are a little bit running out of time, but we have quite many questions. So at this stage, I think it would be nice if we can thank everybody who joined the webinar with us. I'm thinking if we can maybe stay on a few minutes more and take one or two more questions to answer. But if people want to leave, it's also totally fine. It's up to you how you want to do it. The recording is going to be sent out to you with all information also in an email. So don't worry if you don't have time to stay. You will see everything on the recording as well. And reach out if there is something we can help you with. But I think there's a few good questions still that would make sense for you, Elrich, to answer. So are you up for that?
Yeah.
Cool. So here is one question about, at what time would you suggest to bring in a professional help to further implement Scrum? When is support outside needed?
So I think there are two approaches to this, right? Take the time to fail first and fail forward and do it yourself. And it will, of course, take a bit longer than leveraging the power of the insight from outside, like insight from outside. Because that's what I previously mentioned, right? Insight and knowledge, and that really takes time to have that sort of experience. You're going to from the very start. Let's say, for instance, as a Scrum Master, need to coach your product owner. So as a Scrum Master, you do a few things, right? You coach your organization, your product owner, and your development team. And my experience is that if you have never coached a product owner, then that is going to take you a good 6 months to really get good at that. But simultaneously, you need to get a good team going. So where are you going to spend your time? Right? Are you going to have two Scrum Masters in a single time? Or can you ask someone for assistance that is going to help you accomplish this? So one of the anti-patterns, for instance, that I see in newly formed teams quite a lot is the first thing that they start saying is, but our product owner is not giving us the right things. So we now have a highly performing team, and we have a frustrated product owner and a frustrated team. So we need to keep balance. And I would say, leverage the help. And I'm not saying only a coach, I'm saying leverage the help of the community, help of meetups, and so forth, because it's going to slow down your learning curve, or increase your learning curve a lot. And also it's going to help you gain success.
And how can you then adjust or modify everything into today's digital environment?
Is that
it's another question as well? Yes.
Okay. That's such a nice question, I think, because I had a conversation with a few Scrum Masters or coaches I've been coaching, and the first thing that I thought about is what is the value that we can leverage in remote collaboration that we have never or that we weren't able to leverage face to face. And I think accessibility is one of those. So the biggest challenge when we come to remote collaboration is communication of metadata in our or flow of metadata in our communication. And in my experience, that becomes a big problem once you start moving towards high performing team. But if you create good layers of communication, then that's where you start, right? I've really had simple situations where getting the right headsets for the right people simply improved the conversation so much that it elevated the level of the team. So start simple and help them grow step by step and leverage the power of the tools that we have. Something like Discord at this stage, it keeps a real-time link between all members in a team. And some teams find that really useful, so that there's a continuous conversation, which we never had face-to-face. So yeah, I hope that covers the question.
Yeah, I think so. I think we need to cut the webinar for now, at this point. Unfortunately, there are a few questions that are still unanswered, but let's see if we can maybe fit the answers in an email or in a blog post or something after the webinar. Thank you, Elrich, for the presentation. I see a lot of comments that it was helpful and nice and so on. So it makes us always, of course, very happy to get the good feedback as well. From my side, I want to wish you a very good end to the week and a good upcoming weekend. And I hope to see you soon again in the next upcoming webinars. And thank you, Elrich.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day.